All right, thank you, Michael. So, as many of you know, the Department of Health and Human Services is the largest federal civilian agency. It operates 11 operating divisions, and it has, a bunch of offices, institutes, and centers associated with the overall HHS agency. As the largest grant-making agency for research in the U.S., it funds and leverages emerging technologies such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics tools. So tasked with promoting this approach to tech-driven health solutions is the HHS Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And with us today is HHS CTO Ed Simcox. Ed, we're so happy to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
So just kicking things off, artificial intelligence is such a big, important, interesting topic. And you've been on the cusp of innovation in healthcare technology for nearly 20 years. So as the HHS CTO, we just would like to know, what are you and your team up to?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So HHS is a very, very large organization. We have many agencies under us. We are the largest civilian agency, as you'd mentioned. And because of that, we generate a lot of data. It's research data, administrative data, scientific data, around basic sciences, especially at NIH. But all of our agencies, including our small agencies, generate a lot of data. We have tens of thousands of data sets across HHS. And because of that, there's also a lot of opportunity around machine learning and AI. We did a data call recently to try and uncover production level machine learning and AI and RPA projects that are going on. And we were able to surface, as far as production projects are concerned, we were able to surface 18 of those that are in production today across 12 different agencies and staff divisions within HHS. So we're off to a good start in using data, especially for greater secondary use beyond the primary use of why the data was created in the first place, using advanced technologies.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with this huge data challenge that you're trying to solve, that's both scientific data, business data, how did you and your team decide on the approach and methodology to tackle this?
I'd like to take credit for the open data movement at HHS, but really the credit goes to the first CTO at HHS who took that role around 10 years ago under the last administration, Todd Park, who was a huge believer and proponent in the open data movement, especially within government. And he believed very strongly, as did a lot of people, that the data that is generated within federal organizations belongs to the taxpayer, belongs to the researcher, belongs to not only the folks who are generating the data within government, but across government. We need to figure out how to surface that data, open that data, and democratize that data. And that was a very, very important thing. That was a very important conversation for us to start to have back then. As we have moved and matured, we've gone past this idea of just opening up the data. We have to figure out now how to put it to better use, how to scale our use of that data. We are data rich at HHS. We're information and insight poor in a big way. There are great pockets of secondary use of data within HHS, but we have a long way to go on that. When I came into the role, we did a listening tour, and we went out to all of the major agencies and offices, and we asked them a series of very open-ended questions, kind of in the spirit of human-centered design. And two recurring themes in almost every conversation that we had were, number one, we're starving for data. We're starving for data from other components of HHS, other components of the federal government, as well as outside, to get better insights and drive policy decisions, drive research, drive science. The other thing that we realized, though, was that there was a great reluctance. We heard almost across the board that people were fearful of sharing their data, for really good reasons. Number one, a lot of our data is heavily regulated. So you're probably familiar with HIPAA, which carries restrictions around privacy of patient data. There are a multitude of other lesser known restrictions and regulatory issues associated with a lot of our data sets. And sometimes you layer on 3 or 4 of those, and it makes it supremely difficult to try and surface that data and put it to better use. The other thing that we heard loud and clear was that people felt a sense of stewardship over the data. And a lot of times we give that a short shrift and say, oh, well, they're just trying to block the use of the data. But that's not necessarily the case. The people that have been in this data for years and years and years are fearful that the data can be misused and it can cause harm. It can cause harm to people, and it can lead to bad policy decisions. So when we very first started going down this road, we said, how can we surface this data in a meaningful way? How can we scale the sharing of data? And what we very quickly realized is that we had to go to the people first and care for the fears, the wants, and the desires, so that the appetite for data that I mentioned, as well as the concerns around sharing that data. And that's what our Data Insights initiative is all about.
I think that connection that people have to the work and the value of the work at HHS really resonates, and it's great to go out and talk to them to build that trust so that the data platform can be available. So as you know, there's numerous platforms across HHS. We've heard a number of them this morning and in other federal agencies. How is this initiative going to be unique?
Like I had mentioned, pardon me, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. We wanted to listen, and one of the other things that we do in my office is human-centered design. So we're kind of the open innovation shop at HHS, and we wanted to eat our own dog food on this. And so we put into practice human-centered design, and we went out and we talked with scientists, researchers, actuaries, and administrative folks from different walks of life, different professions, to find out what they needed from a data science platform and a research platform. We spent many months really gathering requirements at the people level, if you will, the program level within HHS, to figure out how we could create a platform that would serve as much of the need from an enterprise level as possible. So that was a really, really helpful thing. We didn't want to jump right to a solution. The other thing that I did is I kind of went on a listening tour across federal government. I talked to some of the leaders in this room about data projects that they have going on, and spent some time with some folks who have been down this road before and have learned key lessons, if you will, about how to get folks to share data. And one of the things that we learned early, we actually did start to put out a broad communication about, hey, we need to start surfacing data. We need to bring that data to the forefront. And what the way that was perceived and interpreted, because we hadn't done that human-centered design first, was we're coming for your data, so you're going to give it to us. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't work. That's not a sustainable thing. You may be able to do that once or twice, but to keep the data fresh, to do refresh of data, or to get real-time access to data, or to be on a perpetual cycle of data, it's really important for you to care for those other things. So we also wanted to build into the platform a way to engender trust with data stewards, so that they felt like at all times they had visibility into that data and the way that it was being used and the algorithms that were being run against that data.
So based on that human-centered focus and the data stewardship, what are the areas that you are most looking forward to in terms of how this program will change the analytics and the AI work at HHS?
So we know that, kind of going back to the platform a little bit, what we've done is we've decided to create a platform, again, that allows for a broad use of applications. So you can think about just simple tools like R and Python. I say simple in comparison to some of the more sophisticated things that we do in machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence. We wanted a place where we could surface this data, catalog the data, secure the data, and create, for those of you in the room who are non-technical, a card catalog type of a situation, where if you're trying to solve a policy issue or you're trying to advance your science, you can go into a card catalog like you would in a library, where you may not know all the titles of books that are in that library, but you know the kind of the topical things that you want to go after, and you can use a card catalog to then drill down on the data, i.e. the books that are available. So that's one of the things that we're creating. The other thing we're doing is creating a very collaborative environment where the data steward can actually be in the computing environment at any given time, so real time, or also have a dashboard with a history of how their data is being accessed, how many times, and can actually view the algorithms that are being run against their particular data set.
That's a great component. I know people want to give back with the work that they're doing, and to be able to see how their data is being used is a great component of it.
All right, so can you explain how exactly this new initiative impacts AI initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So number one, we have to have, a lot of times what happens is we go into projects, AI projects. I'd mentioned we have 18 going on right now. I was able to find 4 of those who were accessing the same data sets for the most part. And every time that we have to manually go request data, we have to do what we call a manual data use agreement, a DUA. Other components of the federal government probably call it something else, but anytime we're talking about regulated data, there's this idea of a data use agreement there. What we found was that it was very hard to scale AI and machine learning type things, because the really smart people that we want doing that type of work, we're spending so much time on legal things, administrative things, and process things. So this platform also cares for this idea of a data use agreement in an automated way. So I'll give you an interesting stat. One of our very largest agencies has a huge amount of data, and one of our smallest agencies relies heavily on that data. The smaller agency has 300 people in it. And there are 200 data use agreements, 200 active data use agreements, just to get access to the data from the big agency. 300 employees, 200 data use agreements. Every single one of these data use agreements takes months of back and forth in email, and involves lawyers, it involves policy people, privacy people, et cetera, to get done. So one of the things that we're building into the platform is a way to automate that process, a document routing and creation type of a mechanism where we can template these things and we can adjudicate these things one time. And then we can care for the deltas associated with the next time we use the data. So our hope is, 80% of that data use agreement can be reused the next time that data set is needed. Sure. And we can just care for the rest of it. So if we want to go deeper, say in machine learning or AI, it may be important for us to say care for de-identification or re-identification of that data. But at least we've got the tranche of the 80% already cared for in the context of the data use agreement. We can just work on that 20%. So we're able to accelerate the time to value of getting this data up in the platform so that people can use it.
So one of the areas that you had shared with me earlier when we were talking is the use of virtual notebooks to enable AI. Can you share more with everyone about how you're thinking about notebooks?
Yes. So we decided to take, if at all possible and at all costs, we wanted to examine the environment of open source with this project. I'm a firm believer that we need to at least rule out open source when we look at this. So the entire stack that we have built is predicated on open source. That's the first thing. The second thing we wanted to do was, I love all of our cloud vendors, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't have vendor lock associated with the way we were doing this business. We wanted the stack, if you will, to be portable enough to where we could land that stack in a multitude of different platforms, understanding that when you cross over into a new platform, you're going to have to do some refactoring and reconfiguration. So those were some guiding principles that we had right away, so the open source part of it. Then we built up the stack. We wanted to make sure that we could care for all of the different analytical uses that might be necessary where people bring tools. CMS probably has the most data and the most valuable data, if you will, to the external research community here in the United States. And they primarily compute with SAS and secondarily with Stata. So we needed to care for those tools. We also wanted to care for R and Python and various open source tools. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we cared for more advanced analytical approaches, where we're starting to talk about machine learning and AI types of things. So those were the requirements. And what we came up with was this idea of the notebook metaphor. And the notebook metaphor allows us to, you can either bring your own tools, and we care for licensing associated with bringing your own tools, but we also have a palette of 9 tools available. And just want to make it very clear that we actually just started this, the development of this platform 7 weeks ago. And within 5 weeks, we had a minimally viable product, and we had 136 data sets, public use data sets, up in the platform. And the reason we were able to go so fast is we were able to build on the good work of actually some of the folks in this room, where they had already gone through FedRAMP processes, they had already been ATO'd internally, and they've been able to share their documentation with us, so we don't have to start from scratch. But the one thing that I wanted to go back to is the reason this is important for AI is really, I think, twofold. Number one, again, going back to the stewardship of the data, we want people to feel comfortable that they have visibility into how their data is being used. That's supremely important. It's very difficult to get folks to share data in the first place. But if they feel like they're part of the team that is doing the work, and they feel like it's a collaborative environment where you have auditing of the entire process, where at any given time, if an algorithm is run against the data, you're able to capture that in a point of time and rerun that, and the data steward can see what's going on. And up in the corner of the screen, they have the ability to look at the data use agreement. They can then make sure their data is being accessed and used within the 4 corners of that data use agreement. That's really important as we start to talk about learning algorithms and things, to make sure that we have scale and critical mass, and get people comfortable with the idea of sharing their data.
So I think that we're out of time, but I just want to say 7 weeks is amazing. I know that everyone in this room was very quiet listening to every word you said, so I really look forward to seeing some of the results and hearing the next steps of the efforts that you put in, and just listening to the considerations that you've taken from human-centered design, the technology stacks, some of the privacy and patient data. I think it's a very thoughtful approach. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thanks for letting me share. Appreciate it.
Thank you.